This is Autoline Daily, the show dedicated to all of you enthusiasts of the global automotive industry. Believe it or not, a group of investors in Serbia want to bring back the Yugo. Everybody remembers the Yugo, but for all the wrong reasons. The car was so underpowered and so unreliable that it kicked off a slew of jokes. Why do Yugos have rear window defrosters? To keep your hands warm when you push them. What do you call a Yugo with a sunroof? A dumpster. And yet, despite being the butt of a lot of jokes, an EV startup called Elektromobilnost Balkanika, which is working with engineers and designers who used to work at Zastava, which was the government-owned company that originally built the Yugo, are going to launch a compact BEV hatchback that will be priced under 15,000 euros, and they're going to call it the Yugo Next. It's a modest car with a 40 kilowatt-hour LFP battery that will deliver somewhere between 250 or 300 kilometers of range. Let's call it 170 miles. 0 to 60 takes 12 seconds, which is rather slow. Top speed is only 87 miles an hour. But you know, just for driving around town, who needs more than that? Years ago, back when the factory was still part of Yugoslavia, I was invited to take a tour of the Zastava factory in Kragujevac. You couldn't take any pictures outside of the plant because it was part of a giant industrial complex that also made artillery pieces and ammunition. The car assembly plant was like stepping back in time by at least half a century. It was dark, dirty, and noisy. I did a walking tour with the plant manager, and I was actually able to point out a few simple things of how he could improve his quality and productivity. At the end of the tour, he thanked me profusely, and for years after that, I always got a card from him around Christmas time saying I was welcome to come back to the plant anytime I wanted. I never did get back there, but always appreciated the gesture. Okay, back to the news. When the C8 Corvette came out, it earned all kinds of accolades, but some critics felt the interior wasn't quite up to snuff, like the center screen looking kind of cheap, and the center console grab bar having way too many switches. So the 2026 Vet gets a thoroughly refreshed instrument panel with a larger center screen, a larger instrument cluster, and an additional touchscreen added to the left side of the steering wheel. All the switches on the grab bar are gone, and a couple of cup holders are added to the console. The displays also feature cleaner graphics and new animations. There's a heavy emphasis on improving the quality look of the interior with double stitching everywhere, more finely crafted details, and brighter colors. The enhancements go across the entire Corvette lineup, including the Stingray, the E-Ray, the Z06, and the ZR1. Looks like another EV startup could be about to bite the dust. The Detroit News reports that Bollinger Motors is filing for bankruptcy. A court-appointed receiver will take control of the company's daily operations and assets because it's having trouble making payroll, and it faces 8 lawsuits from suppliers that are owed money. The guy who founded the company, Robert Bollinger, is also suing the company to recoup $10 million that he loaned to it. Mullen Automotive is now the effective owner of Bollinger Motors, but it's accused of not providing enough funding for day-to-day operations. The current CEO, Brian Chambers, claims the company is committed to keeping the business going, and he's optimistic about the future. But Roush Industries, which is contracted to make the trucks for Bollinger, stopped producing the vehicles in January, and earlier this week it locked Bollinger out of its facility, and it's moving to evict it because it's owed $1.8 million. So it sounds like we're coming to the end of the road for Bollinger.
There's nothing wrong with heavy metal.
Hey, lighten up.
But with world-class composite material, Teijin Automotive Technologies makes vehicles lighter, safer, and more eco-friendly.
Hey there! Enjoy what you're watching? Then consider becoming an Autoline member.
Just click the join button on the Autoline Network YouTube homepage, or we've also set up a Patreon account under Autoline. Now, absolutely nothing will change with the content that we already provide you, but we're giving exclusive access to even more, like early viewing of Autoline exclusives, behind the scenes videos, and even live Q&As with John and I.
Europe has new regulations that require automakers to reduce brake dust by 90%. So Brembo's coming out with a new type of disc and pads that cut those emissions at the same time that it boosts performance, durability, and gets rid of rotor rust. The Euro 7 emission standards that go into effect next year tackle brake dust because it includes microscopic particles that can embed themselves deep into your lungs and cause all kinds of respiratory problems. Brembo says it was able to achieve that thanks to a new process that applies 2 layers of nickel-free coating on the disc rotors by using a laser beam. That reduces surface wear by 80% compared to an uncoated cast iron disc. Brembo says the new brakes can be used on any kind of vehicle. European automakers just got a big break. The EU officially approved rolling back CO2 emission rules to a degree. Automakers can now meet the 2025 CO2 targets over the next 3 years instead of having to hit them this year. Automakers aggressively lobbied to soften the rules because they claimed they faced fines of up to 15 billion euros by missing those targets. And while the ACEA, which represents European car makers, applauded the approval, it says the industry actually needs a lot more long-term support from the EU in terms of charging infrastructure and incentives for purchasing EVs if it's ever going to meet those CO2 targets. Well, we just can't let a day go by without doing an update on the tariffs since they're having such an impact on the industry. Here's the latest. Ford is raising the prices of the Maverick, Bronco Sport, and Mach-E by $2,000. That's because they're all made in Mexico and are now hit with a 25% import tariff. But Ford is clearly eating a big chunk of the cost because we estimate the Bronco and Maverick are getting hit with at least a $5,000 tariff, and the Mach-E is probably double that. As we already reported, Ford says the tariffs will add about $2.5 billion in cost this year. GM says it's going to be between $4 and $5 billion. And this morning, Toyota announced the tariffs will shave its profits by at least 21%, which is staggering. Last year, Toyota posted a $31 billion operating profit, which means the tariffs could cost it $6 billion. Here's one bright spot. President Trump is announcing today that he secured a trade deal with the UK, and we think that probably means that cars imported from England, including Jaguars, Land Rovers, Minis, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, McLarens, Aston Martins, and all those other small specialty marques, will only get hit with a 10% tariff, not 25%. Since they were already paying a 2.5% tariff, that's only a 7.5% increase, which I'm sure is something they can all live with. And even though those tariffs are only getting slapped on new imported cars, they're actually starting to have an impact on used car prices. According to Cox Automotive, wholesale used prices in April were at their highest level since October of 2023 because dealers bought more used vehicles at auction because they expect more shoppers to buy used as new car prices go up because of the tariffs. That started a bidding war that drove up prices for used cars. Cox Automotive does not expect prices to decline much in the second quarter because wholesale inventory is tight right now, and retail sales of used cars are running stronger than normal. Hey, before we go, be sure to tune in to Autoline After Hours later today. We're going to have Hubert Verhoeven from Harman Automotive talking about the latest developments in digital cockpits in cars. Paul Waddy of Auto Pacific will also be on the show. We're going to be digging into the car brands that could be forced out of the U.S. market because of the tariffs, how they might try to salvage the situation, and the new car sales hangover that's sure to hit around July. Anyway, with that, we wrap up today's show. Thank you for tuning into Autoline Daily.
Autoline Daily is brought to you by Intrepid Control Systems. Over-the-air engineering boost your game. Teijin Automotive Technologies, the formula for better mobility. And by